Hi guys, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. Okay guys, I've got a post here from Hashgraph, and I think this is something that you're going to want to understand because to me, I actually think this is very big in terms of adoption for Hedera overall. But I'll go through the pros and cons of this. So, Hashgraph says, regulated institutions can't operate on infrastructure where competitors can see their flows. That's not a theoretical risk, it's a direct liability. Our first behind the ledger paper breaks down how HBAR enables atomic settlement without exposure. Okay, so what they're talking about here is basically private transactions. So the reason why I said, there's going to be some people who might not like the sound of this is because obviously the whole ethos of blockchain technology is that it's transparent, right? Everybody can see what you're doing on the network, etc. So you can't really hide things. Now, that can be a positive and a negative, right? Because obviously, if you're someone who's rich, this means that people can potentially find out how much crypto you own, right? So if, let's say, we get to a point where the Clarity Act comes through and a lot of these cryptos go very high up in value, you could have numerous people who are like millionaires through various different crypto holdings they have. And, people could try and basically trace the activity, watch what's going on with the cryptos, watch where they're moving to try and basically build up like a footprint of the person, get an idea of what the person's doing, and potentially try and find these people, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard about this, but there has been things of people getting like kidnapped and stuff like that, like real serious stuff. So you have to really be careful with this. And so there's obviously that negative side, but there's also the transparency side of things, right? So, people can't really hide what they're doing, which obviously people like because it's fair, right? Now, you got to understand, when it comes to these institutions, they were never going to be having all their information on the blockchain where everybody can see all the hash graph. That was just never going to happen. It's just not something that would be feasible for them. And even if, let's just say, it wasn't a liability, they're just not going to do that. Like, you just got to understand, these banks are not going to be showing you their operations. Now, whether that's because of like nefarious reasons or they just want to have their privacy, who knows? But I just know as much as this is that they're not going to put themselves out there for everyone to see, to be scrutinized. That's just not something that they was going to do. And so what they're talking about here is you've got the HBAR, which is, the HBAR is basically like a private version of the hashgraph, the Hedera hashgraph, right? And so this is something that the banks can use where their transactions are private. So this is going to be for like the big institutions who want to use this. And so this is where obviously I do think overall this is going to be beneficial for Hedera, and I'll explain why. Because obviously the HBAR and the Hedera hashgraph are separate, right? So the activity that's done on the HBAR isn't going to directly impact the hashgraph, right? Because the HBAR that's being used on the hashgraph is not being used on the HBAR. It's a separate thing, right? It's like a private version of the same network. So this is where obviously a lot of people might say, well, that's not great, because then you've got all these institutions on the private network, but that's not doing anything for the, the HBAR on the public network, and that's where we really need to see the value. Yeah, like I do understand what you're saying there, and that is it is a valid point to a degree. But I'll say this: the reason why I still think that this will still be beneficial for Hedera overall, even if they were using the HBAR rather than the normal Hedera hashgraph, the public network, is it's the credibility that it adds, it's the prestige that it adds, right? So let's say you start seeing over time, let's say like the Clarity Act passes, for example, right? And then let's say you start hearing, okay, the Bank of America are using the HBAR and they're really happy with it. They're, singing its praises. They're going to continue to use this going forward. And then you've got JP Morgan who comes along and they also say, yeah, this is absolutely great. We love this technology also. We're going to continue to use the HBAR. And you just keep hearing like big names using the technology, right? Well, although yes, their activities are not going to be directly impacting the Hedera hashgraph, the public network, what you've got to understand is the positive praise that Hedera would get off of the back of that will mean that other companies who maybe don't need to use the HBAR, or people, just developers, etc., will still see how the network is being viewed, right? So if you've got, like, for example, like let's just go with the Bank of America and JP Morgan saying like, yeah, we love the hashgraph, it's really great, the technology is great. Well, you've got to understand it's just basically a duplicate of the Hedera hashgraph. So for the developers and people who, are not using hashgraph, well then, they can obviously just build on the Hedera hashgraph, because they'll say, well, okay, they say the Hedera hashgraph technology is great. Obviously, they're just using a private version of it. So yeah, we'll develop on the Hedera hashgraph then. So they can still gain people and users to the network off the back of this, right? It's not all just negative kind of thing in terms of the activity is not going to help HBAR. But yes, would it be better if it was directly being done on the public hashgraph? Yeah, absolutely. But again, if you really thought that these banks and institutions were going to be putting all of their activity on a public network for everyone to see, you were dreaming. Like that was just never going to happen. They were never going to do that. So for me, I'm not surprised by this. I think this is really the next best thing you can ask for. They're still going to be using a private version of the network. And as I say, if it goes well, they'll obviously still sing its praises of the network, and that can still add to them getting a lot more adoption. So I think this is good to see. Like, I do think this is something that's going to be positive overall. So yeah, I just thought this was worth sharing, so I thought I'd cover it with you guys. But let me know what you think. Like if you guys have any information as to why you think this is not great, then I'm happy to hear it. If you've got logical reasonings, then I'm happy to hear it. But for me, I still think this is going to be a positive. I still think it's going to help Hedera in the long term, and I still think it can aid with its adoption overall. So let me know what you guys think. I'll leave it there. If you did like this video, please remember to like, comment and subscribe so you can be updated for future HBAR content. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can be alerted on when I do drop a new video. Thank you very much for watching this, and I'll see you all on the next one.